I dislike people who are resistant to change, I think. And within the profession, that's the way we're going. There's a lot of change coming, and I really like people who grab innovation, grab change, can see what's different.
The lawyer I'm interviewing today has been the Global General Counsel at Barings Asset Management right here in the City of London since 2007. Barings' history, of course, goes back as far back as the 1760s and is now part of the Mass Mutual Financial Group that has over $400 billion under management. She's perhaps the only non-female and ethnic minority lawyer holding such a position in the city. She has been named as one of Britain's 100 most influential people of African or African Caribbean heritage. Since July 2011, she has been a board member of an international body based in The Hague. That is the panel of recognized international market experts in finance, prime finance, as well as being appointed to this panel of experts. She read law and politics at Birmingham University, graduated in 1986. She attended the Inns of Court School of Law for the bar exams and was called to the bar at Lincoln's Inn in 1987. In 1990, she qualified as a solicitor, and in the same year, she joined Schroders, where she remained for 17 years. In 2007, she joined Barings in her role covering the UK, Europe, North America, Asia, including Japan.
The person I'm of course interviewing today is Sandie Okoro. Sandie, welcome to BLD Interview.
Thank you.
Can you remember your first job?
I can indeed. My first job was at Marks and Spencer's. It was a Saturday morning job,
yes.
And I had the nice nylon uniform I was very proud of, and I worked behind the tills. And it gave me the ability to obviously have my own money and some independence. I was 14 at the time, and I was very, very nervous about the whole thing. And I thought it was the most responsible job I'd ever had because I was in charge of the tills and the money.
Right.
And I enjoyed it immensely. But now that it was in Tooting Broadway, and now it's at TK Maxx.
Oh, it's TK Maxx, wow.
So I can say I once worked at TK Maxx.
Yes, absolutely. Before TK. Before TK. So, why did you choose a career in law?
It was something that was very vocational. I really felt it was something I always wanted to do. As a small child, I watched a programme, Crown Court, and I thought I wanted to be a judge. I wanted to be one of the judges up there. And so I decided, well, you know, work out how you get to be a judge. And obviously, you know, qualifying as a barrister, going through that route was one of the ways. So for me, there was never any other profession I wanted to do from about the age of 9, 10.
Really? What pushed you off the supermarket then?
The uniform. The uniform.
So really, if you were to choose another career other than law, what would it be and why?
That's a very good question, actually, and it would be something completely different, and it would be a dancer, because that's what I was really good at school and won competitions for. And I remember once saying to my mum, maybe that's what I was going to do, and it was a very short conversation.
No.
But if I was going to do anything else, I would have trained to be a dancer.
Good dancer. What kind of dance?
Well, modern dance, not ballet,
Oh.
but modern dance. And then after I was too old to dance, I'd have been a choreographer, because I still love all of that.
Right, okay, maybe one day.
Maybe one day, yes.
So, if you can remember, what was the best career advice you ever had?
The best career advice I ever had was actually from one of my direct reports when I was at Schroders. And he said to me, in your career, never align yourself to any one person's coattails. Make sure that you are servicing everybody in the business, and that not just one person is championing you, because if that one person moves on, you're going to be stuck. And that was a very good piece of advice, because often you hear it the other way around. Just find someone to champion you. And he said, no, there's an absolute danger in the way that business is these days, that people move on and you've lost your champion.
Right, best one. What about the worst career advice?
I was from my father, which was be a pharmacist. Because you can work and stay at home and look after your children at the same time, because you can live above the shop. Well, at least he was choosing a profession for me, and wanting me to have a family, as all fathers do. So
great, great. Right.
I think he was also looking for free prescriptions, but there you go.
What is the best career advice you would give others?
I don't know that I'd say it was the best, because I think you can get different career advice from different people. So one of the key pieces of career advice I think I would give to other people is, I know it's going to sound very trite, but work hard. Don't expect it to just fall in your lap. You've got to really work at your career, and it's a long-term thing. So work really hard, because you will reap the rewards. And what I would say to women in particular is never think of it as optional, because once you start thinking about it as optional, you kind of water it down.
You're in hard work.
Yeah, exactly. It's not optional. Work really hard at it, and the rewards will come.
The other question is, does it actually mean for women you have to work even harder?
I don't necessarily think so at work, that you have to work even harder. I think you have to probably work even harder outside of work to keep juggling everything in the way sometimes men don't have to do. I think the working even harder is, actually sitting at your desk and working harder, probably not. But what you do have to do is make sure you are involved in all the other things that are going on, the networking, etc. So I don't think just working harder will get there. You've got to be able to network, you've got to be able to plan your career, all the other things you need to do as well. Just working hard in itself.
It's interesting you bring that up, networking, because for a lot of women, of course, if you have family and everything else, that is actually quite difficult, because you're dashing home to be with your family. So how do you manage that?
Oh, do you know, I really don't know the answer to that. I've managed to fit it in. I think when I started, because I'm a very social person anyway, so I probably didn't even realise I was networking when I was networking. But what I would say is juggling it with a family and with work and all the other things in your life. And it may not be a family, it may be a family member you have to look after, because often women may be looking after elderly relatives, etc. It really is a case of prioritising and actually starting with setting aside time for your family. So I set aside times during the week when I never go out and never do anything. And once you've done that, then you're working around the other days. So actually, in my diary, people think I'm really hard to get hold of, and it's weeks and weeks and weeks. It's because I set aside set days. I go home, do homework with the children, do whatever, and on the other days I will be doing that networking. So there's lots of things I get invited to that I don't go to because they fall on a Monday or Friday or whatever it is, because that's family time, and I go to it the other times. So you have to prioritise.
Good, great advice. So which moves to the really natural point. Next point is, what are you most passionate or happiest about?
I think I'm most passionate and happy about my children, because I love them to bits, and I'm really pleased that so far they've turned out to be pretty decent children, which is not always easy when you've got a full-on job and you're doing this and you're doing that, and you might not be with them as much as you want. Other than that, outside of sort of family life, I think feel really passionately about social mobility in the legal profession and diversity, and that's where I actually spend a lot of my spare time and devote my spare time to, either through mentoring or through...
I know you do give time for
I do, and that is actually where I do my networking. I combine the two. I combine my passion for those two things with the networking at the same time. And as I say, I didn't even realise I was doing it, but as a result you are networking. So I don't really tend to network in just the purely professional legal circles and the purely financial legal circles. I am a member of the CLO, and I do that in the General Counsel arena, but I also try and promote within that the diversity and social mobility agenda.
Now you're passionate, what about dislikes?
Well, one of the things that I think I dislike people who are resistant to change, I think. And within the profession, that's the way we're going. There's a lot of change coming, and I really like people who grab innovation, grab change, can see what's different. That's one of the things I think that has really happened in the last 10 years. Everybody's lives changing. We've got an iPad, we've got this, we've got that. Technology advancements in medicine, all sorts of things to really change the way communications people. So I tend to dislike people who aren't going to embrace change. I don't dislike them personally, but I dislike that attitude because that's not about the future, and I probably don't have much time for people or organisations like that. Also organisations that don't like to change and don't move forward. They're not my kind of organisation.
And they eventually die.
And they eventually die because that's what happens if you don't change. You become a dinosaur.
So, what about the person or persons you most admire, dead or alive?
I admire Nelson Mandela hugely. Not only because he was a lawyer and he fought for his cause and he fought for justice, and then obviously stood up to the plate in terms of what that meant for him and all his years in prison, but also the way he handled it when he came out. And I think he was just a terrific president and a terrific statesman and everything. You look up to him in so many ways. So I do admire him. A new one on the block is Nicola Adams, who won the first boxing.
I love that girl.
I
want to take up boxing.
I've taken up boxing as a result of her, and I'm not joking, I seriously have. I've always liked boxing, and to see her win the first, she was the first woman to win Olympic gold. She was the first final, and to see her, and I just loved her attitude. So those two are alive, obviously. So those would be the ones I'd probably like to sit down and have dinner with and talk to. I think of those that are dead. Coco Chanel is one I would like to. Okay. Yeah, Madame Chanel. I mean, I know there are positive and negatives about Coco Chanel, but she really changed women's lives, and she was one of the first women entrepreneurs. She really set a path. She set a brand that is still there and lives after her. I mean, she was quite phenomenal, and I know she was named in Time magazine. She's one of the few women that were named as who changed the 20th century, and she really did. And what people don't realise, she literally set women free by taking away the corset, which allowed them to do so many things. So I think when you look at her, I think that was really quite amazing. And I also think another lady who is dead now as well is Rosa Parks, who wouldn't want to sit at the back of the bus. And just a tiny thing, and why I admire her is she wasn't a leader, she wasn't a politician, she wasn't a Nicola Adams who was steering a path towards a particular sporting achievement and excellence. She was just a lady getting on a bus. I thought, today I'm not going to do it. And to have the guts to do that, and in that environment where you could be dragged off the bus and beaten or whatever, I do admire her for that. And one of the things about Rosa Parks many people don't know is that she had been involved in various things to do with women in the southern states anyway, and I think she just had enough that day, and I really admire her for standing up for her rights. So if I could resurrect those two people, that would be those are
standing on very looks passive but really
exactly exactly, and that's what I admire.
Fantastic. So tell us more about your role as the, obviously Global General Counsel here at Barings. Tell us a little bit more about that role. What does that entail?
It's a very exciting and interesting role. It entails getting involved in many commercial and corporate issues across the organisation. It involves interacting with my colleagues at Mass Mutual as well, who are our parent company, dealing with things that are cross-jurisdictional in nature. So it's everything and anything as well. And it's interesting times in the industry as a whole, quite challenging times in the industry as a whole. There's a lot of regulation. There are lots of, the city itself has gone through a lot of change since the financial crisis. So, it's an interesting time to be a general counsel.
What is your typical day like?
Chaotic. I don't think there is
Let's have a picture of this chaotic day then.
I don't think there is a typical day. It certainly starts off with a pile of work I need to get through, and it usually ends up with just one piece of that from that pile being moved on. So lots of meetings, some of them committee meetings, some of them ad hoc meetings, Usually an interaction at some point with an overseas office and someone in an overseas office. So working across time zones is usually something that has to be dealt with. You know, giving spur of the moment advice, direction, and also often maybe talking to external counsel as well.
Of course, of course. Is there a lot of travelling involved in your job?
It depends how you define a lot of travelling, but I would say I do travel a fair amount. Not as much as some people in the organisation, but probably a lot more than most people in the organisation. I try and visit each of our offices once a year, and we have offices over in Japan, Taiwan and Hong Kong, and over in the US. So you're doing both sides of the world, and my trip to Asia will often be a 2-week trip. So that's quite a long time away from home. So at least 2-3 times a year I'll be travelling for work. So I think that falls into the middle category.
I suppose. Global General Counsel Barings, do you still have more mountains to climb?
Absolutely. I'm just at the bottom right now.
You feel you're at the bottom?
I feel so. I think there is much more to do. I don't think in terms of organisations I could, in terms of organisations, probably not many other organisations that can equal or be on a par with Barings. Maybe in terms of size and number of people, but actually in terms of, reputation in the industry, what it does. It's on a par with many. But when I think about what else I'd like to do, I think there are just many more things I'd like to get involved in. Some of it may be around policy making, and then, as mentioned, about social mobility, etc. So it's probably veering off into another field rather than climbing a further general counsel ladder.
In terms of the role of the in-house lawyer, how has that role evolved, and how is that going to even change further in the future? How do you see that changing further?
Well, I think it's evolved from something being rather quiet and dull, and where you go to retire, which is what I think senior partners from law firms used to do and come to the GC role, to something being much more strategic, something that is very much a conciliary in the organisation, something that is now seen as part of the risk management of the organisation, and the legal function along with compliance and risk are considered some very key functions within organisations, particularly in the regulatory environment. So I think the role and strength and depth of the in-house team has changed. One of the things I have noticed is that many more people are leaving private practice at a 4 and 5 qualified level, which is actually their most profitable level, and coming in-house from a number of Magic and Silver Circle firms. All of a sudden you're attracting that real depth and quality of talent.
Do you know why?
Yes, because I don't think
attraction at that stage.
Because, well, this is just pure conjecture, because I've never really worked in private practice, but what I see is that probably at that stage you're thinking about partnership or not, or where that's coming from, and people are making the choice that's not what they want to do, so they get out and think, well, there's no point spending any more time. But that's just, that's conjecture. I'm not saying that's a scientific study, and that's what, but I think that's what is happening, and I think that's not the way. I don't want to be like the partners I see ahead of me. I don't want to lead that lifestyle. I want to go and do something different.
For those listening to you right now, would you say therefore there's probably more of a work-life balance in-house as opposed to private practice? I know you don't have experience of it, but
without
from what you've heard,
without a doubt. The real difference is it's going to be down to the individual as well. What suits the individual. You as a private practice lawyer have got lots of clients. You as an in-house lawyer have one client. So you've got to know how you feel about that. So your experience of what is going on is a little bit more tunnel vision as an in-house lawyer, because you only have experience of that organisation. But what you do have is experience of lots of law firms and how they work. Because you have lots of law firms, you're the client of lots of law firms. When you're in a law firm, you don't have experience of how lots of law firms work, so you're quite tunnel vision in the way your own organisation works, but you see how the particular industry you're an expert in works. So it just depends which side of the fence you really want to sit on, and what's really going to be of interest to you. Do you want to see yourself as supporting an industry? So for me it's financial services. I work in financial services. I work for a financial services institution. I'm not front office in that organisation. No. I'm not a fund manager. When you're in private practice, you are front office. You're a fee earner, and so it's a very different way of where what you want to, how you want to, where you want to position yourself.
I want to put something to you that I've heard sometimes, that the reason there is no work-life balance so much in the private sector is because of lawyers like you in in-house demanding very high standard, even more so, reducing charges and overheads, and wanting more for less, basically.
No. That's wrong.
Do you want to expand on that?
I'll expand on that. It is the model. It's the private practice model that creates the chargeable hour, that creates the issue, because you have to bill so many hours. The way I understand it, you have to bill so many hours. You get given a target and you have to meet it. And they're I think it's quite a stretch for a lot of people. So that's the model. As a result, that's the way the charges work. And that's why it's so expensive. So you think, I'm going to get my money's worth if you're costing me this much. And because it's by the hour, you kind of think, well, you can pick the hour up as you're going along. So it's the model of private practice that drives that along. So it is the cart going before the horse, and we didn't put it there.
Well, that would be another conversation, talking about this other model. Just talking about professional highs, what would you consider to be your professional high?
I think there are two. One was when I was made a director at Schroders, shortly after I came back from maternity leave, and the second was getting this job here at Barings. The third was being interviewed by you.
A flatterer. Do you have any professional regrets?
Yes, I think one of the professional regrets I have was I originally qualified as a barrister, and I wish I'd actually practiced as a barrister properly for long. I didn't really. I just qualified and left the profession and re-qualified as a solicitor. So that's probably one.
What have you missed, really? What do you think you've missed?
Well, it's like anything, when you haven't done it, you've missed something. You just feel, oh gosh,
You do know what you can do when you retire now, don't you?
I have other plans. I have other plans. but I think that's probably, not having experienced life at the bar for at least giving it 2-3 years. But everybody says, what did you miss? And I find that very hard to answer.
You probably realise you missed nothing.
Probably true, actually.
Finally, Sandie, if you could rule the world for a day, what would you do or change?
Now, I can tell you that. The one thing I would change would be I would make the world a safer place for women. And this is something that I've been thinking a lot of recently. And I think if you actually took away the threat of violence, because there's a lot of women across the world who face that in war zones, etc. And the world is actually, for the majority of women in this world, we're very lucky where we live, the world's quite a violent place for them. And as a result, they're not really allowed to reach their full potential and live their lives in the way that she should, and contribute towards their societies, their countries, their families, however you want to do it. And I think if I had a magic wand, people say world peace, they do whatever. I think actually if you took away the threat and the actual, action of violence against women, I think you could change the world overnight.
That is a very positive thought to end. Thank you so much, Sandie.
Pleasure.
Thank you.